name's Ezra.
My name's Leah.
Micah.
Taylor.
And
This is our podcast.
yep, on Eugenia's Marigolds.
Okay.
So the one thing that I wanted to point out was how she remembered her hometown. I don't think she remembered it how it was, but how she felt at that time. She brought up how it was dull, dry, dusty. I feel like this kind of shows feelings of sorrow and hopelessness, and how she just sees her hometown in her eyes and not with the actual landscape.
I would just like to point out how Eugenia, that's how you say her name?
Yeah.
She speaks on like what her childhood looked like, basically saying it looked dusty, it was brown, it was just didn't have any color.
Yeah.
And it kind of just helped the reader get a better imagery of where she came from, how she was raised, not how she was raised, but like what she's used to. Yeah, that's what I had to say right now.
How did you guys think of that portion when
So
she
I
brought up her hometown?
kind of want to tie it to like what I was reading and picked up on, which was like the innocence factor. Like,
Yeah.
you know, since she viewed her town as kind of like dry and dusty and boring, and you know, this was kind of the height, or I assume the height of like the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of she still feels like a kid, you know, playing out during the summer with her brother and her friends, and then by the end of the
Right. I don't mean to cut you off too. She did mention that she was 14 going on 15.
Right.
So yeah,
like that's a perfect like age of
Yeah.
like jumping in
Upcoming.
from like being a kid
hitting
to
puberty.
Yeah. So she has all these feelings, and like towards the end she even marks about how she transitioned from childhood to womanhood, you know, at this time. And so I felt like there was a lot of ties to, you know, being a kid and being innocent and in relation to her hometown and how she viewed it.
Which I also feel like is why she kind of pointed out how she remembers her hometown as the light of the town being Miss Lottie's Marigolds. I feel like was like a key factor of like almost foreshadowing. It was like there's nothing in this town but the light, which is the Marigolds.
And then going off of that, when Eugenia put, I had indeed lost my mind for the smothering emotions of that summer, so I didn't she's like the summer and the hometown was getting at her, and then the flowers were just like a picnicking at her, like they're just like, hi, like this is happy, like we're showing happiness, and like you're not happy.
Yeah, it was kind of like I like how you said that, kind of like a fake, like this is like a happy bubble, but like everything around it is showing despair.
Right.
And I feel like,
Which is interesting because marigolds are my favorite flower, and so they point out like it's energy, good luck, all these positive things, and you know, during the Great Depression there's not much to look forward to.
Yeah, like nothing at all.
And so I'm sure everyone else who wasn't a child looked at Miss Lottie's marigolds and were like, oh, something bright and happy, I can look forward to something.
Right.
And here's Elizabeth, the character, just like
hates it.
yes, she hates it.
Yeah,
She
she's like,
hates
this
Miss
isn't-
Lottie. She hates these flowers. She hates her town.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so weird, like as a kid as well, to kind of like be the kid to be like, oh, I hate these because of what they like,
Yes.
what I look at when I see them.
Yeah.
It was like, as a child, like that's not something I think a regular child would think about.
That, or I noticed how they were bullying Miss
Miss Lottie.
what's her name?
And
Yeah.
her son.
Yeah,
Johnson.
and her son. Like, you're 14,
Yeah,
15,
like,
thinking
and the
about
bullying was,
torturing an old lady
Yeah,
who
it was
looks
like-
miserable.
It
Like,
was not regular bullying either. It was like they're really going
ham,
at this woman.
getting the biggest stone they could find to throw
And my
at
thing
their
Yeah.
light that they call their their
Yeah.
marigolds that they call their light. But
yeah. And my thing is like the bullying at that age, like yeah, you're a teenager, but like you still have some sense of consequence. Like
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
not gonna go up to an older person
Right.
and be like, oh, I'm gonna bully you, harm you, whatever. So it's just crazy to me because one, where are the parents? I know they're
Where
suffering
are the
through their own
parents?
thing, but like you know, they're going through the Great Depression of not having jobs and you know,
Right.
trying to provide for their families, but like.
the
y'all's
parents
kids
are working
bullying.
though, like you
Yes.
said.
and I
Yeah.
also think like they look at Miss Lottie as like something like as a like a beast or dragon.
A
Right.
witch.
Yeah.
They said a
They
witch.
did.
Mhm.
I mean, did you guys ever have anybody like that growing up
Yeah,
where you're like, oh, there's old man Jenkins?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know?
And so like they also talked about how like they looked at her as like tall and like a powerful woman, and then the next thing you know, they're kind of attacking her, and I was like,
That's a good point to bring up, though. Like,
Wait,
I
where
found
did
there to help her like go through the tough times, so they just brushed it under the rug, so she didn't know how to deal with her emotions. So when she saw the Marigolds again, it woke her up. I think she kept thinking about it. So when she woke up, her brother like, "Are you coming with me?" She wanted support, and she couldn't find support, even
Yeah,
though the
like-
Marigolds.
she literally says that she couldn't sleep because she's scared of what her mom and dad are arguing about. So.
Right.
which is a lot to handle for a child,
Yeah.
like, or
Yeah.
you know, any age really. Like seeing your parents argue about something that's not even in their control. Like this is the Great Depression. No one's in control.
And you
of
know what's
finding the
crazy?
jobs.
She states, basically, this is after she brings her brother out somewhere, anywhere. She states the half dawn light was more eerie than complete darkness, and in it, the old house was like the ruin that my world has become, foul and crumbling. Grotesque. How do you say that?
Caricature. Grotesque
Okay,
caricature.
okay. It looked haunted, but I was not afraid because I was haunted too. I'm like,
That's
wow.
a lot for being 14.
Yeah.
Like I thought
To
I
feel
was
that you're
dramatic.
haunted
She
too.
had all these emotions.
Right.
So, but that's a lot for 14 to
Yeah.
That's what I'm
compare
saying.
yourself in your old house to something crumbling, a gross caricature. I can't say it now,
Right.
but being haunted also. Like that's a lot on top of, you know, these feelings of becoming an adult and a woman and dealing with your family's dealings and everything.
And especially
Right.
after like witnessing her parents arguing, it's kind of like, is this is how she's feeling from hearing that? I think especially I find the argument between her mom and dad interesting because it shows like her mom is the strength of the house.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that often. And then
Traditionally, it's
Yeah.
the man, yeah,
And
the
even
breadwinner,
points it out.
yeah,
winner,
and
yeah.
you see the man, like her dad is embarrassed and like he's crying and I don't think she's ever heard a man cry.
No.
So-
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. A man crying, that's
Yeah.
very
She
powerful.
couldn't even handle it. So she was like, I covered my ears with my hands
Yeah.
and cut off the sound.
And she compared her dad to sobbing like a tiny child.
Yeah.
Like
Tiniest
imagine
in the
seeing
house.
like that's crazy.
Right.
Like imagine seeing like your dad who's probably like what, let's just say 6'5", you
Right.
know, tons of muscle. He does a certain job that requires a lot of labor, and then all of a sudden you see him crying and it's like, oh wow, he's like a child.
Smaller
to
than
me.
me,
And then
right?
at the other side of that, you see her say her mother, who is small and soft, has the strength of the family.
Yeah.
And so it's like, as a woman, to be the breadwinner, and that's powerful.
Yeah, but I feel a friend told me this recently. There's a lot of strength in being a woman who has a lot of emotions, and so to see that flipped, where it's like the mom, like you said, Ezra,
Yeah.
like the mom
Strength,
is now
yeah.
the strength, and you know she's providing money and you
Right.
know working hard for the family, and the father's providing the emotional support,
Right.
or needing that emotional
Right.
support. That's a huge shift in everything.
I was just about to say that. You took the words out of my mouth.
Do we want to pause? I think
Again.
So Miss Lottie, they said Miss Lottie, as I stood there, awkward and ashamed. Miss Lottie was proud of her flowers. Like we see throughout the text that she wrote, like she worked hard. She was on her hands and knees grinding, and then the little girl, she was ashamed because she finally realized what she had done over the night come. So that was taking accountability and going to the end of her childhood. Because
Right.
as kids, you don't take accountability for what you
Yeah.
did.
Right.
Like
I
the start of
highlighted
her
that too.
womanhood,
Yeah,
And I
Right.
feel
I was
like
proud of you.
her looking at her was kind of like she just realized everything. It's kind of like a rush of emotion as well as like what I really did. And I feel like that is, like you said, the start of her womanhood and the ending of her childhood.
Right. Y'all basically just said this, but I basically highlighted on page 3 it said, I did not join the merriment when the kids gather again under the oak in our bare yard. Suddenly I was ashamed, and I did not like being ashamed. Like you guys said, she's a child actually feeling guilty. Like what child, feels guilty?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're all
Over-
rebellious.
Yes.
I feel like that's also her talking about her self-perception of like,
Right.
like I'm feeling something like that I'm not used to.
Oh,
Which
that's
kind of
true.
like shows the start of the transformation and change.
That's true.
And I feel like she kind of ignores it because the marigolds are still up, and it's kind of like well, like I'm looking at them, everything's fine, and like I'll just push this feeling aside.
Like there's some light in my life.
Yeah, and then when the marigolds get destroyed, it's kind of like that. It's like a snap. Like that's what causes everything to unfold, and like everything she's pushing aside comes back.
Right. Well, and the short story ends with the line, "For one does not have to be ignorant and poor to find out that his life is as barren as the dusty yards of our town. And I too have planted marigolds."
Mm-hmm.
So she, again, she detested these, marigolds, for a whole summer. It seems like, her life is changing. She's changing from being a kid to a woman at this point. And so I feel like there's like a metaphor of just the marigolds, not just like in the literal sense of like what she did to Miss Lottie's marigolds, but like now she has marigolds of her own, which are, being ashamed, having guilt,
being a woman,
and I was trying to find the words,
you're coming up your
feelings of, being a woman at that age. And it's interesting that it's I too have planted marigolds, and not like, oh, I bought marigolds or I saw marigolds somewhere else. It's like these are what I made,
right? So, and those are her happiness, as if it was for Miss Lottie's. Yes, Miss Lottie.
I feel like that was also interesting to say, like, as she's becoming and became a woman, like, I now see Miss Lottie's, like,
perspective. Yeah.
And it kind of was like, this is deeper, and it's like.
And it's like, am I a witch too?
Right? I wonder if she thought that, like, oh man, I destroyed someone's, happiness.
Exactly.
And I witch too, if I thought Miss Lottie was a witch my whole life.
Right.
What are people
am
gonna
I?
think of me?
Exactly.
So, which I'm sure it comes in with the feelings of being ashamed.
Right.
Like, it's that weird feeling of.
Right.
And then she puts before your quote, she puts my wild. I don't know how to say the word, but she planted marigold. She never planted. Miss Lottie never planted again.
Mm-hmm.
Showing like she probably thought like, oh, she's gonna plant. I'm gonna do it again. I'm just gonna keep doing. Like, I'm gonna do this cycle. Miss Lottie was like, no, you need to grow up. You need to take accountability for your actions. We're not doing that no more. You need to move forward. So I think that made her realize, like, dang, made her do a full 360, 180.
Right.
I feel like it hit harder that she didn't plan it.
Yes.
Like what you were saying. Like, I feel like it kind of shows like that's it.
Yes. And that's kind of like the theme with like womanhood. Like once you become a woman, once you become a man, like that's it. Like there's no going backwards in time and be like, okay, I'm gonna be 8 years old again.
Yeah. Right.
As much as we wish that.
Right. There's no going back.
Yes, but there's no going back. And just like it's hard to plant flowers, like especially in the Great Depression in a dusty town. Like,
and also shows like her whole house and like her home and literally everything that Miss Lottie like owns or is of her is not as good as the marigolds. Like everything is shown as like dusty, like broken down. Like they literally had a portion where they said they're surprised her house is still standing. Her son is just like lost.
There, yes.
Right.
And then you have these beautiful marigolds that just sit like pretty. It's just I feel like that was kind of like interesting to show the difference between the light of the town and then who really owns that light. And it's like, oh well, Miss Lottie doesn't really have anything.
I was gonna say.
Question for the audience: do you think Elizabeth's journey from childhood to adulthood was conveyed thoroughly